A foreclosure notice fluttered on the glass Brent once made her clean. His voicemail begged. His daughter called her heartless. His son was already charged with theft. Eleanor didn't answer. She just watched their chaos unravel from a $49 motel room. She wasn't their wife anymore, not their stepmother, not their safety net. She was the co-owner. And this time, she'd signed the papers to make them pay. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. He said I was just mouths to feed. I'd fed them all. Eleanor smoothed the placemat with the heel of her palm, the same way she used to do case files, edges aligned, no evidence of wear. The roast chicken was already carved, vegetables neatly spaced around it like passengers who didn't want to touch. She'd folded the napkins into simple triangles. Jason wouldn't notice. Taylor would roll hers into a tube and pretend it was a cigarette. Brent would eat in silence unless something on the news made him grunt. At 6:03 p.m., everyone was seated. No one said thank you. Jason forked a leg onto his plate. "Man, I forgot how good real food tastes," he said, grinning with his mouth half full. "Cafeteria slop has nothing on this." Taylor gave a tight-lipped smirk and muttered, "That's because she's got nothing else to do now." Brent didn't respond, just reached for the salt shaker. Jason snorted, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and added, "I mean, she's basically just mouths to feed now, right?" The sentence hovered for a second. Eleanor waited for Brent to say something, to correct, to flinch, to even shift in his seat. He didn't. He passed the salt to Jason and asked Taylor if she had figured out her course schedule. Eleanor didn't answer either. She chewed slowly, as if her own presence needed to be consumed in small bites, so no one choked on it. By 6:47 p.m., the dishwasher hummed in the background. Brent flipped channels. Taylor scrolled. Jason left his plate on the counter like a gift nobody wanted. Eleanor wiped the kitchen sink twice, folded the towel just once, and stared at the magnetic calendar with its grid of everyone's plans, except hers. At 11:19 p.m., after they'd all gone to bed, Eleanor stood in the hallway holding a single suitcase. She packed only what she'd bought herself: 2 pairs of shoes, 3 blouses, 1 sweater with the tag still attached, and a hardback copy of The Art of Asset Recovery. No makeup, no toothbrush, not even her coat. She didn't want to take anything they'd think she owed them. She slipped off her engagement ring in the bathroom, let it clink against the soap dish. The sound was lighter than she expected. At 3:12 a.m., the house was still. Brent's sleep machine hissed faintly from down the hall. Jason's door was open, Taylor's half closed. Eleanor's keys made no sound against her palm. She drove in silence, no music, no GPS, just the hum of tires over asphalt, like the road already knew where she was going. The motel was 24 minutes away. Roadside, off the freeway, the kind of place no one would ever think she'd go. That was the point. The clerk didn't ask questions, gave her a key, room 7. Inside, it smelled like lemon cleaner and dust in retreat. A dim lamp flickered twice before settling. She set the suitcase down and reached into her bag for the folder labeled Joint Accounts, All Access. The tab had been red for years. No one had ever asked why. She opened the folder on the motel desk like it was a court deposition, printed statements, passwords, dates, routing numbers, all lined up like suspects. Every account she'd opened, every card she'd co-signed, every payment she'd made without discussion. The ink pen she pulled from her purse felt heavier now, like it knew what it was about to be used for. She began circling numbers in red: the mortgage auto draft, the 3 utilities in her name, Jason's emergency dentist bill, Taylor's out-of-network therapy, Brent's pickup truck lease. She underlined totals with slow, deliberate strokes. When she got to the joint savings, the one she'd built from leftover paychecks and Christmas bonuses, she laughed once. Quiet, almost cruel. Then she said aloud, to the stillness, to the silence that had fed on her for years, "Let's see how self-sufficient they really are." Outside, a train passed somewhere in the dark. She didn't look. She already knew what leaving sounded like. Eleanor circles every dollar she ever gave and starts planning what to take back. The house still had heat, but I took the power. At 6:11 a.m., Eleanor sat on the motel bed, the motel's floral bedspread still folded beneath her like an unwelcome gesture. Her laptop glowed dimly. A ceramic mug, slightly chipped, held lukewarm coffee she didn't plan to finish. She'd woken before the alarm. Not out of anxiety, but preparation. She logged in. One banking portal, then another. She didn't flinch at the two-factor prompts, didn't hesitate when the systems asked if she was sure. Yes, she was. The joint checking account, locked. Joint savings, frozen. Credit card line ending in 2381, canceled. Line ending in 7042, revoked authorized users. Mortgage autopay, disabled. She paused only once, not for emotion but efficiency, confirming that the smallest residual balance still went where it should, to her. Her severance was modest, but unentangled. That was all she needed. Her fingers hovered over the last entry, Brent's truck lease. He had signed it, but she'd co-signed. His credit needed a boost back then. She clicked the request for formal transfer of liability. Let them try to qualify solo. A text pinged from the bank's fraud team confirming unusual activity. She replied with a single word: intentional. By the time she left the motel to pick up a burner phone and reactivate her pre-marriage P.O. box, notifications were already piling in. Alert: your account access has changed. Subscription failed. Auto debit declined. Your streaming service could not process payment. The family group chat she used to be part of was quiet on the surface, but beneath it, digital tremors had started. Back at the motel, Eleanor watched them ripple. Jason posted on Facebook, "Can't believe this gym doesn't have backup access when their tech fails. Do better." Taylor tweeted, "Love when your morning starts with all your cards suddenly declining. Cool, cool, cool." And Brent tried to pump gas. She imagined the moment clearly. Card swipe, machine pause, error beep. His brows furrow, tap again, then again. Finally, the dismissive growl. "Stupid thing's broken." She imagined him walking inside to try another card. Same result, the quiet panic rising behind his ribs, disguised as irritation. She didn't smile. She just logged into her new credit union app and confirmed the deposit had cleared. Next, she scrolled through her phone's archive. Old texts from Taylor, sweet when she needed tuition help, punctuated with hearts. A few from Jason, too. "Just this once, Eleanor. I'll pay you back next week, promise." She deleted them all. No folders, no sentiment, just deletion. At 3:22 p.m., she booked another week at the motel, room 10 this time, bigger window, no adjoining wall. The clerk remembered her, offered a small discount and a key without comment. She paid in full on her new debit card. Later that evening, she walked to the vending machine, pressed the buttons in muscle memory, chips and a small cola, and returned to her room just in time to see Brent's post spreading across his timeline. "Anyone seen Eleanor? We've been robbed." He had the nerve to post it above a picture of the house, her house, with the front porch lights still burning. She stared at the image, the same door she used to clean every Saturday, the doormat she had replaced twice. She took a sip of cola and watched the comment thread explode. Someone asked, "Did you call the cops?" Another, "You sure she didn't just leave?" She closed the tab. She didn't need to track the fallout. By nightfall, utilities on autopay began sending their own alerts. Water account disconnected due to non-payment. Streaming services suspended. Electric billing flagged for error. Contact needed. And somewhere in that house, a remote wouldn't work. A faucet would hiss dry, and 3 people would look at one another with growing confusion. Eleanor sat back on the motel bed, folder resting beside her, her laptop still open but untouched. This wasn't revenge. It was math. They thought she was just mouths to feed. She'd been the heat, the light, the infrastructure. Now, they'd have to relearn the difference between living with someone and being carried by them. As Brent's post circulates, "We've been robbed." Eleanor watches his crisis unfold like a film she no longer stars in. They thought I was just the help. I was the house. The spreadsheet began with a title, "Everything I paid for underneath, Eleanor typed in 14-point calibri, column by column, item, date, amount, and note. No fluff, no sentiment. Row 1, down payment, 2012, $42,000. From my severance plus mom's life insurance. Row 2, HVAC unit, 2018, $6,300. Brent said it was too steep. I paid in full. Row 3, Taylor's fall semester books, 2021, $768.44. She never thanked me. Row 4, Jason's DUI attorney retainer, 2020, $2,500. He called me overdramatic afterward. She kept going. Every row like a bead on a wire pulled tight. The motel desk had become her workstation, her courtroom, her confessional, and none of it was guesswork. Eleanor had receipts. At 7:14 p.m., she picked up her phone and called Lisa. Lisa picked up on the second ring. "Tell me you're not back with him." "Not even in zip code range," Eleanor said. "But I need your help." Lisa's voice shifted. "Talk to me." Lisa arrived just after 9. She didn't ask questions, just set her portable scanner on the desk and pulled her laptop from a worn leather case. She wore a gray hoodie, with the words, "Fraud happens fast," printed across the chest, and Eleanor suddenly remembered why she'd kept her in the "if I ever disappear" contact list. They started with printed records, bank statements, Venmo histories, mortgage disclosures. Lisa scanned, renamed, and filed every document with clinical precision. "I don't think I've ever seen someone this invisible carry this much," Lisa muttered, eyes never leaving the screen. Eleanor didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was the testimony. At 10:03 p.m., they opened the car files. Brent's truck lease, still unsigned by refinance agents. Jason's health insurance. The old HVAC contract. Eleanor's name the only one on the final payment authorization. Lisa's brow furrowed. "Wait, this truck? The one he's still driving?" "Yup. You know he listed it on a dating app profile last year like it was his?" "I was the co-signer," Eleanor said simply. Lisa exhaled. "Girl, you didn't just help them. You built them." "No," Eleanor corrected. "I bankrolled them. They built themselves, on top of me." The voicemail icon blinked on her phone. Eleanor tapped it without flinching. Jason's voice came in hot and cracked. "You better answer me, Eleanor. You're ruining everything. Dad can't even make the car payment now and Taylor's flipping out. Call me back. Fix this." She hit forward, saved the message to a folder she'd already labeled, Evidence, Threats, Emotional Leverage. Lisa nodded at the name. Neat, cold, accurate. Eleanor opened the next folder, a manila one marked Property in faded blue Sharpie. Inside were the closing documents from when she and Brent had first moved in together. Title page, deed, mortgage lender information. Lisa scanned each page in silence. When she reached the signature block on the deed, her eyes stopped. "You know your name's still on this, right?" Eleanor didn't look up. "I never asked to be taken off." Lisa leaned back slowly in her chair, arms crossed. "Well, that changes things." Eleanor clicked to save the latest version of her spreadsheet. "Now let's make it count," she said softly. The motel ice machine hummed somewhere beyond the wall. A light outside flickered, but inside that room, surrounded by paperwork and low-watt ambition, Eleanor wasn't dismantling a life. She was inventorying her investment, down to the cent, the ceiling beam, the breath, and she wasn't finished, not even close. Eleanor still legally owns part of the house, and now she knows exactly how to prove it. They thought she'd walked away. She was still on the deed. Angela Martin's office was painted in shades of patience, dusty gray walls, low brass lamps, and file folders stacked like folded flags. Eleanor sat with her back straight, one hand resting on the folder she now referred to as her ownership Bible. Angela flipped to the deed page and tapped once with her index finger. "They never filed a quitclaim," she said, almost amused. "You're still a co-owner." Eleanor didn't smile. "I never quit." Angela met her gaze. "Then let's make sure they remember that." They filed the notice of interest that afternoon. Angela had it drafted in 15 minutes, filed electronically in less than 5. By the time Brent's mortgage broker tried to process the refinance the following day, the system flagged the deed as contested. The alert halted everything. Angela emailed a confirmation. Subject: "Your footprint is back." Body: "And they can't wash it out." Later that week, Eleanor sat on the motel bed, knees drawn up, watching the local news play on low volume. She tore the wrapper off a vending machine sandwich, barely tasting it. Her phone buzzed with a push alert. Taylor Davis posts new update. Eleanor clicked out of instinct. The tweet read, "Family drama is the worst, especially when people pretend they were victims while holding the purse strings." No mention of names, but Eleanor knew deflection when she saw it. She screenshotted the tweet and texted it to Angela with the caption, "Useful tone for later." Angela replied instantly, "This one's framing her own villain arc. I'll archive it." By Thursday, Eleanor sat across from Angela again, this time with a signed document in front of her. The formation certificate for Mouths No More, LLC. Angela explained, "We transfer your half of the home into the LLC. That means any correspondence, collections, or disputes must go through your entity. You now legally control your portion, without them knowing your next move." Eleanor ran her finger over the embossed seal. "Let's hope they keep underestimating me." Angela arched a brow. "Hope? No, Eleanor, let them." Back in Brent's kitchen, where Eleanor used to dice onions and answer calls mid-chop, chaos was finding its footing. The water bill arrived and went unpaid. Jason blamed Brent for ignoring the overdue notices. Brent accused Jason of using too much hot water for long showers. "You're 24 and you still act like this place runs on magic," Brent barked. "I didn't ask. To live here, I stayed to help you," Jason snapped. Taylor slammed her bedroom door and tweeted 3 times that night, cryptic first, bitter next, then something about ungrateful people biting the hand that stocked the fridge. At the motel, Eleanor sipped a warm Coke and watched the spiral. No panic, just satisfaction measured in tiny clicks and escalating dysfunction. Angela called later that evening, voice calm as ever. "So, the question is," she said, "do you want to reclaim the house quietly? Or do you want them to bleed trying to keep it?" Eleanor paused. Behind her, the motel's neon vacancy sign blinked off rhythm. She didn't answer immediately. She just leaned forward, picked up a pen, and drew a slow line under the words, LLC Property Control. "Let's remind them," she said finally. "What happens when a woman stops asking?" Angela prepares the next legal step, one that could force Brent to fight for the house or lose it altogether. They thought she was gone. She was the signature still holding the lock. The paperwork was just 3 pages long. Angela slid it across the table in a slim folder, her expression unreadable except for the faint twitch of satisfaction at the corner of her mouth. "Quiet title," she said. "It won't scream, but it'll echo for years." Eleanor signed the final line with a fountain pen she hadn't used since her last court filing as a paralegal. The ink ran blue-black, formal, final. Angela would file it today. Brent wouldn't be notified yet. That would come later. For now, the motion itself was enough to send ripples through every attempt he made to recover what he assumed was his alone. By Friday morning, the phone calls started. Brent's refinance application hit a wall when the county clerk flagged an open title dispute. The broker left him a voicemail. "You didn't mention a co-owner filing, Brent. That complicates things." Brent didn't know what a quiet title was, but he'd learn fast. Jason started picking up weekend shifts at a hardware store down off Glenview. His Instagram went dormant. Taylor posted an unboxing of budget makeup with the hashtag #OneGrinding 2 weeks before she maxed out the only credit card that still worked. At 9:42 a.m. Monday, the mail arrived, a manila envelope with the county seal, addressed to Brent, legally served, officially recorded. Inside, a court summons naming Mouths No More LLC as the co-owner disputing legal clarity of title. A hearing was scheduled. The house was under legal contention. Taylor grabbed the envelope from the table, scanned the name, and shrieked like someone had reached through the paper and slapped her. "This is her! This is her! You said she was gone!" She stormed to the front door, caught the mailman halfway to the curb, and hurled the envelope in his direction. "Take it back!" The mailman blinked. "That's not how court summons work." Brent stood frozen in the hallway, the color gone from his face. She must have had help. Back at the motel, Eleanor sat with Angela's latest email open on her laptop. Subject: time to squeeze body. They've missed 2 mortgage payments. We can initiate a foreclosure pre-notice. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She replied in one line, "Do it. They've been living rent-free long enough." She didn't flinch when her phone pinged with Jason's latest Reddit post, an all-caps tirade on a relationship thread titled, "What do you do when your ex-stepmom literally steals your house?" The top comment read, "Sounds like your dad married better than he deserved and got legally outplayed." Eleanor closed the browser, stood up, and grabbed her folder of original financial records, the same one she'd begun building in silence while making dinner no one thanked her for. At the bank, she requested a private consultation and opened a safety deposit box under her own name, just hers. The bank rep handed her the key. It was simple and silver, heavy in a way that made her smile. She placed inside it the signed LLC formation papers, her copy of the deed, a flash drive with all digital records, and a photo of her mother smiling from behind a lemon cake they couldn't afford, but made anyway. As she shut the box, she whispered softly, "Nothing they built had a foundation I didn't pour." And somewhere, across town, a house started shifting on its axis, walls warping around the truth they'd tried to paint over. Foreclosure begins. Eleanor now has the power to take the home, or let them lose it themselves. She thought a paralegal job could reverse bloodlines. She forgot who trained her. The court response came in on a Tuesday morning. 7 pages, watermarked with the seal of the county title firm where Taylor worked part-time. The name on the filing, Taylor Davis, Pro C. Angela raised an eyebrow as she slid the printout across the table to Eleanor. "She filed herself. No counsel," Angela said, voice clipped. "Rookie flex. Let's look." Eleanor read silently. The motion accused her of abandonment, sabotage, and emotional dereliction of familial duty. Taylor cited undue hardship, claimed Eleanor's exit left the household in financial ruin. There was a paragraph about betrayal, another about psychological manipulation. Angela snorted. She watched one too many true crime docuseries. Eleanor's expression didn't change. "Or read one of my old court summaries and forgot who wrote them." Angela smiled, all teeth. "Let's return the favor." By noon, she'd assembled a counter-response thick enough to need clips. Every transaction, co-signature, Venmo transfer, and bank withdrawal Eleanor had made for that house over the past 12 years. Angela stapled it with a practiced punch. "Let's file this, and let's make sure the judge sees it first." By that evening, Taylor's social media had sharpened. Her tweets read, "Imagine betraying the people who let you live in their home. Some people weaponize legality to hide their guilt. She chose money over memory." Eleanor didn't respond. Not online, not aloud. She went to the county courthouse in person instead. Flats, pressed blazer, the same understated necklace she wore to her first job interview. The clerk at the window glanced at the file number, then back up at her. "You're the co-owner." Eleanor nodded. "Yes, and I'm here to make sure they remember that." The file room smelled like old toner and filtered air. She sat at a long wooden table with her manila folder, pen uncapped, eyes scanning every page like a woman reconciling a ledger, not of money, but of erasure. When she finished, she closed the file, stood, and walked slowly past the county seal etched into the marble wall. It didn't feel like winning, it felt like correcting the record. Later that night, Brent emailed her. Subject: "Let's talk like adults." Body: "This doesn't have to get worse. Let's meet and figure this out. You know where I am." Eleanor forwarded it to Angela. Added no comment. Didn't need to. The preliminary ruling came down 2 days later. Angela read it aloud while sipping from a thermos labeled, "Ruin strategically." Judge affirms plaintiff's co-ownership. No sales, rentals, or legal transfers allowed without LLC consent. Full discovery to proceed. Angela looked up. "We just nailed the door shut." Eleanor nodded once. "They'll try to kick through the windows." "That's fine," Angela said. "We already own the locks." That afternoon, Eleanor wandered downtown. No particular direction. She stopped in front of a bakery she used to pass on her way to deposit checks Brent didn't remember she'd earned. A woman inside boxed a birthday cake, smoothing the final layer of white frosting with quiet precision. Eleanor watched through the glass. No longing, no envy, just observation. Then she whispered, to no one in particular, "Let them eat crumbs." And she meant it. Taylor plots her next move, but Eleanor's grip has already tightened. They searched for what they thought was hers. They found what had always been proof. The call came in just after 9, crackling through Angela's line while Eleanor sipped her first motel coffee of the morning. Angela didn't even greet her with a hello, just a dry, satisfied breath and 5 words. Jason tried to pawn jewelry. Eleanor didn't ask which pieces, she already knew. The fireproof safe in the guest room closet had always been her one indulgence in paranoia. A low-profile cube tucked behind an old shoe rack, keyed and coded with documents Brent once mocked as over-prepared nonsense. She never told anyone the code, never labeled the key. Only she knew the combination, and only Lisa knew it even existed. By noon, the officer handling the pawnshop complaint had reached Brent. Surveillance footage confirmed Jason's identity. He walked in wearing a hoodie, sunglasses on indoors, and tried to pawn 2 gold bangles, a pearl drop necklace, and an antique watch Eleanor had inherited from her great-aunt. He claimed they were family items he had permission to sell. When the clerk hesitated, Jason got flustered and left. The store reported it to the police as a suspected theft, and within hours, the name Eleanor Davis was flagged in the county system again, but this time as the rightful owner. Angela called back that afternoon with a tone Eleanor had learned to interpret as controlled glee. "We got the warrant to search the house for additional property. You're still legally tied to it, which gives the request standing." "They won't find what they think they're looking for," Eleanor said calmly. "No," Angela agreed, "but they'll find what you left." And they did. The warrant execution revealed the safe, untouched and still sealed, behind the rows of old winter boots no one had worn since Taylor started shopping exclusively online. Once opened, with Eleanor's key provided via Angela, the officers cataloged the contents with body cams rolling. Inside were not just valuables, but an archive of foresight. Receipts dated back 11 years, warranty cards from Big Ticket, appliances, a notarized list of heirloom items, a leather folder marked primary owner documentation containing everything from Brent's original lease agreement on the truck to Jason's community service notice from his DUI case. Angela arranged for everything to be photographed, sealed, and transported for digital archiving. Lisa volunteered to assist with the intake. That evening, Lisa arrived at the motel with her scanner and a duffel bag full of organizing trays. The two of them worked in tandem, like they had in the earliest days. Only now, the stakes were personal, not hypothetical. "Half of these are better organized than anything I've seen in court evidence," Lisa muttered, feeding a property tax statement into the scanner. "I didn't pack to leave," Eleanor replied, eyes steady on the spreadsheet she was updating. "I packed to be believed." Around midnight, while waiting for a file to upload, Lisa paused and held up a velvet pouch from the box. "This was the necklace he tried to sell?" Eleanor nodded without looking. "It's beautiful." It was never his to value. Elsewhere, the internet began to do its work. A local reporter caught wind of the attempted theft after the pawnshop clerk shared the footage on a private Facebook group. Within 24 hours, it reached a subreddit about familial financial abuse. Someone dug up Jason's earlier post, the one painting Eleanor as a vengeful ex-stepmom, and reposted it with an updated caption. "Update. He tried to rob her, too." That night, Brent's employer removed his photo from the company's website. Taylor posted a vague tweet. "You can't steal what was given," which Eleanor screenshot and quietly forwarded to Angela with a short message. "Can we subpoena that tweet?" Angela replied, "Absolutely." At 1:12 a.m., a news anchor appeared on screen while Eleanor folded towels in her motel room. The segment showed surveillance footage from the pawn shop, blurred faces, and a narrator who explained the situation with hushed, sober gravity. When they said Eleanor's name, she didn't react. She folded the towel in her hands again, precise corners, steady hands. The camera cut to a shot of the house she once cleaned on Sundays while everyone else slept in. She paused. Only then did she look up and say softly, "Now they know whose house it really was." The court record now includes physical evidence, and public opinion starts to shift in Eleanor's favor. She didn't want to be known. She just wanted the truth recorded. The request came from a local journalist named Miriam Grant, 40s calm voice, the kind that didn't push but didn't bend either. Her email was respectful, concise, and legally clean. She wasn't interested in scandal or spectacle. What she wanted was a profile, a real one, something that looked at Eleanor not as a walking headline, but as a ledger with breath. The proposed title was sharp but respectful. When the matriarch walks out, what one woman did after being called a burden. Eleanor didn't agree immediately. She made Miriam wait 3 days before replying. Then she sent a list of conditions that read more like a legal memo than consent. No photo. No names of family. No mention of the motel or current location. Every fact must be supported by verified documentation. And if any sentence bordered on pity, the entire piece would be pulled. Miriam agreed to every term. They spoke twice over encrypted video. Miriam asked precise, necessary questions about the LLC, the safe, the title claim, never about feelings. When she finally asked, "Do you want people to know who you are?" Eleanor answered, "No. I want them to know I existed." 2 weeks later, the article dropped. It wasn't flashy. It ran mid-scroll on the regional news homepage, next to a story about a local school bond and a traffic rerouting plan. But by morning, it had 60,000 shares. By noon, it had been reposted by older women's advocacy groups, financial abuse recovery circles, and forums with names like Divorced Not Dead and the Midlife Exit Plan. The comment sections filled fast, first with curiosity, then with recognition, then with gratitude that felt like a wave Eleanor hadn't realized was rising. Some posts read, "I didn't know we were allowed to leave. I thought I was crazy for tracking every receipt. She saved a version of me I didn't know was worth saving." Lisa printed out a few of the early replies and brought them to the motel in a manila envelope labeled fan mail. Eleanor laughed, genuinely, for the first time in weeks. "Is this what they call going viral?" she asked. Lisa smirked. "You're not a virus. You're a vaccine." That afternoon, Eleanor created a new folder on her laptop. She named it Proof I Was Real. Into it, she saved every screenshot, every PDF of supportive emails, every anonymized message thread, each one like a quiet affidavit in a life that had always been signed in invisible ink. Meanwhile, Taylor's Twitter account went dark. The deletion wasn't announced. It just disappeared, along with every tweet that once hinted, shaded, or blamed. The silence was louder than any apology. Miriam emailed to check in. The subject line read, "Response is overwhelming. Hope you're okay." Eleanor didn't reply. She didn't need to. Later that night, her phone buzzed once. A text. Brent. Subject, "You win" message. "Come home. Let's fix it." Eleanor stared at it for a moment. There was no punctuation at the end, as if the thought had run out of itself before finishing, as if Brent still believed this was a game with a trophy and not a reckoning. She deleted the message without replying, then emptied the trash, then powered the phone off. She stepped outside the motel room barefoot and stood on the cool concrete walkway beneath the flickering overhead bulb. In the distance, a train passed. Not loud, not urgent, just present. Inside, her inbox filled with one more message from someone named Rachel in Ohio. "I left 2 days after reading about you. I just wanted you to know. You helped me believe the exit existed." Eleanor reread it twice, saved it to the folder, then whispered, "One down." Eleanor's story becomes a movement, and Brent finally realizes she's not coming back. He wanted to fix it. She'd already begun the demolition. Brent's text still lingered in Eleanor's deleted folder for less than a breath, before she torched it permanently and opened a blank email draft. Not to him. To Angela. Subject, response. Body, let's do the cease and desist and invoice him for the unpaid debts. Angela didn't ask which debts Eleanor meant. She already had the spreadsheet. Column after column of quietly shouldered expenses, mortgage floats, utilities covered in silence, Jason's DUI attorney, Taylor's out-of-network therapist, Brent's overdue truck lease. By noon the next day, Brent received a letter via certified mail. Inside, a formal cease and desist, signed and notarized, ordering him to stop all direct contact, and a documented request for reimbursement totaling $38,917.14. Attached were records, highlighted bank statements, and payment confirmations. The letter ended with a phrase Angela insisted on including, "Further silence will be interpreted as consent to the terms." Brent didn't respond. He couldn't. His credit report had just updated, and for the first time in years, it wasn't padded by Eleanor's timely payments. He saw them now, all the delinquencies that had been softened, delayed, or blocked by her intervention. It read like a confession in numbers. 2 utility companies called in one day, the bank closed the overdraft-protected joint account, and his refinance rejection, now official, came with the stamp. Title disputed, frozen by LLC order. In court, Jason pled no contest, caught on surveillance trying to pawn heirloom jewelry, with a paper trail of texts that proved intent. His public defender whispered rapidly at his side while the judge read the charge. Misdemeanor theft. He was sentenced to 80 hours of community service and a fine he couldn't pay. The courtroom was mostly empty. Jason's eyes stayed down the entire time. That same evening, Taylor tried to call. It didn't ring. Eleanor had already blocked the number 2 weeks earlier. Instead, the call routed to voicemail, which Taylor never bothered to leave. Eleanor logged the missed attempt in a notebook she now kept for post-filing behaviors. Entry: Emotional phishing. Week 5. Angela finalized the quiet title claim the following Monday. The ruling came through clean. Mouths no more, LLC officially held half-legal ownership of the property, and the judge issued a temporary injunction preventing any sale, sublease, or title manipulation. "They can't even list it on Craigslist," Angela said. "You own the breaks." Eleanor didn't celebrate. She simply exhaled, long and deep, like a woman finally stepping out from underwater. Meanwhile, the house began to empty. Taylor left first, dragging 2 suitcases and a puffy coat down the sidewalk while cursing at a rideshare driver who didn't help with the trunk. She moved in with a cousin upstate. Brent followed within the week, couch surfing at his older brother's until he could figure out next steps. A neighbor reported that for 3 days, the house sat with porch lights on in the daytime and trash piling up at the curb. Nobody claimed it. Nobody cleaned. Eleanor made one more call. A veterans housing nonprofit she'd quietly supported for years. She asked to speak to the director directly. "I want to offer my half of a property," she said. "Discounted. Quiet sale. It's structurally sound, but emotionally bankrupt." The woman on the other end paused. "Why now?" Eleanor looked around the motel room she'd outgrown like a snakeskin. "Because I don't want it back," she said. "I just want it redeemed." The paperwork moved faster than expected. The nonprofit reviewed the title, assessed value, and identified a candidate family within a week. Eleanor let Angela handle the legal handoff. She didn't want a key. She didn't want a visit. What she wanted was to know the house would be lived in by someone who needed it, and not someone who mistook survival for sacrifice. Eleanor gives away her half of the house and begins planning something even more permanent. The house wasn't stolen. It was rehomed. The final paperwork went through on a Wednesday, quietly, without ceremony. Angela called first, her tone smooth with restrained satisfaction. "It's official," she said. "Daniel and the girls are cleared. Title has shifted. You're no longer their neighbor. You're their past." Eleanor stood in the corner of her motel room, the receiver pressed lightly between shoulder and cheek. "And Brent? Received notice this morning. Registered courier, signed with a trembling hand, apparently." Eleanor didn't ask how Angela knew that. She didn't have to. Brent's voicemail came 2 hours later. 38 seconds of clipped rage, tripping over its own fury. Eleanor didn't press play. She just watched the voicemail timer count down in silence, as if letting time run out on him was its own kind of justice. Across town, Brent stood in the kitchen he no longer legally owned, fists white at the edges. The envelope had been thick. Inside, a complete legal transfer of Eleanor's LLC share, now in the hands of a nonprofit housing trust. The new co-owner, Daniel McAdams, father of 2. No one had asked Brent, no one had warned him. Taylor found out by accident, scrolling through a community housing blog while pretending not to cry in her cousin's spare room. She arrived at the open house the following Sunday, face blotchy, wearing an oversized hoodie that made her look younger than she ever acted. She didn't even get to the living room. A volunteer recognized her from a social post and gently intercepted. "I'm sorry, Miss Davis. We've been instructed not to admit prior occupants during transition events," Taylor argued. Loudly, she called it her house, claimed it had been stolen, demanded to see the woman who gave away our lives. When security approached, she dropped her purse and burst into tears. Daniel, inside, stood with his daughters near the front window, watching the scene unfold in a muffled hush. The younger one asked if everything was okay. "It will be," Daniel said quietly. "It already is." Later that week, Eleanor agreed to meet him. Not at the house. She'd made that line permanent. Instead, she chose a cafe 2 blocks from the courthouse, a modest spot with good tea and soft light. Daniel arrived early. He was younger than Brent, but looked more weathered in the eyes, like someone who'd learned patience by force, not choice. He stood when she entered, didn't offer a handshake, just a gentle nod, like he knew exactly what kind of grief had made this gift. "I don't want to intrude," he said, "but the girls wanted me to say thank you. They've already picked their rooms." Eleanor smiled faintly and reached into her canvas tote. From it, she pulled a small ceramic lamp, sea glass green, faint hairline cracked down one side. "I used to read by this," she said, placing it gently on the table. "Keep the light gentle." Daniel looked down at it like it was something sacred. "They call it the warm house," he said, "because it doesn't echo when they laugh." Eleanor didn't speak right away. She just nodded once, like a judge closing a case, and stood. She didn't look back. That night, she returned to the motel and opened the plastic bin she'd labeled Finals in thick Sharpie. Inside were the ring box she never gave back, a receipt from her last full grocery run, and the empty lamp base she had detached that morning. She placed the ceramic socket inside, patted the corners with 2 dish towels, and sealed the lid with a piece of duct tape. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just whispered, "Let there be light," and turned the bin to face the wall. Eleanor clears the last item from her past and quietly plans the next place she'll belong. Her final swing wasn't justice, it was desperation dressed as paperwork. The civil suit landed in Angela's inbox on a rainy Tuesday, 6 pages, badly formatted, and riddled with italicized grievances. The plaintiff, Taylor Davis. The claim, emotional distress and financial sabotage. The narrative read more like a diary entry than a legal brief. Angela didn't even blink. She printed 2 copies, underlined the word cruelty in red ink, and slid one across the cafe table to Eleanor. Filed pro se again. Girl didn't learn the first time. Eleanor didn't touch the paper. Let's not give it more weight than it has. The claim included allegations of calculated cruelty, manipulative silence, and orchestrated abandonment, painting Eleanor as a bitter ex-stepmother who had weaponized money to erase her stepchildren's stability. Angela filed a response by the end of the day. It included a thread of deleted tweets with timestamps, audio files of Taylor's voicemail rant, labeled by tone, itemized bank records showing transfers to Taylor's tuition account, Amazon wishlist purchases, and even DoorDash receipts from months Taylor claimed she'd gone hungry. The response ended with one line, "This is not hardship, this is hindsight weaponized." 2 weeks later, the judge read the filings aloud in a courtroom Eleanor didn't bother attending. "This case," the judge said, removing her glasses, "is as vindictive as it is meritless." She dismissed it with prejudice. Taylor was fined a small fee for filing abuse and ordered to submit a written acknowledgement of misconduct or face contempt. Angela called Eleanor from the courthouse steps. "Victory lap or nap?" "Neither," Eleanor replied. "Donate the refund." "To who?" "Women's Shelter, the one on Ashwood. Put this on the memo line, for women who almost stayed." Angela didn't say anything. She just exhaled the kind of laugh that comes from being both burned out and burned clean. By the end of that month, Eleanor had moved into a modest co-op in a quiet part of town, a 2-bedroom with a window seat that caught morning light and a creaky kitchen floor that felt like memory instead of flaw. She kept the walls bare except for one framed quote on the entry table. She left when it was still loud enough to be called leaving. One afternoon, Camille showed up, her niece from her sister's side. She'd texted ahead, "I'm close. Can I see you?" Eleanor had replied, "Doors open, blankets waiting." Camille arrived with tear-swollen eyes and a knit throw wrapped over her shoulders like a shield. "I got out," she said before Eleanor even closed the door. "I would have never made it if you hadn't shown how." They sat in the window seat, knees touching, silence thicker than the tea steeping on the stove. "You were always my favorite," Camille said. "You were always your mother's shadow," Eleanor replied. "Now look, full sun." They didn't cry. They didn't need to. The following Sunday, Eleanor hosted brunch in her small kitchen, just Camille and 3 older women she'd met online through a support forum titled Late Bloomers, Early Exiters. No one wore makeup. Everyone brought something homemade. The table was cramped, the conversation easy. Midway through the meal, they raised their mugs. Some tea, some coffee, no champagne. "To new leases," said Camille. "To not needing permission," said Diane, a retired nurse who'd left her husband after 42 years. "To floors that creak because they're real," said Marisol, an ex-finance manager with a filing cabinet of silent receipts. Eleanor lifted her mug last. "Peace isn't given," she said, voice steady. "You earn it like rent, every damn day." They clinked mugs, and for a second, the clatter sounded like applause. In another part of the city, Taylor sat alone in a shared apartment, her phone dark, her notifications silenced. The case had gone public. Her cousin had stopped replying. Her father still hadn't answered her last message. And somewhere deep in the recess of her unread email, the acknowledgement of misconduct still waited for her to sign. Eleanor's peace becomes contagious, and Taylor realizes the silence isn't a pause. It's the end. Some stories are whispered, others are filed where no one can erase them. It started with a document, as so much of Eleanor's life had. Not the court filings or bank statements this time, but something more deliberate. She sat across from Lisa at her dining table, a laptop open between them and a folder labeled Narrative Assets, resting at the edge of the table like a sacred book. Eleanor had written the title across the front in her precise, unwavering print, The Mouths I Fed. They worked through winter weekends, layering the memoir like a legal case. First the blog entries Eleanor had quietly begun posting under a pseudonym, then excerpts from the official court rulings, QR codes linking to public records, and selected emails from readers who had sent her digital thank yous like letters dropped into an invisible mailbox. Angela joined on the legal end, redlining anything risky and reminding Eleanor more than once that truth doesn't need embellishment when the receipts already shine. "You're not publishing revenge," Angela said one night over red wine. "You're publishing record. Make that the difference." Eleanor didn't respond. She just kept typing. By spring, the finished manuscript ran 182 pages. It had no dramatic climax, no teary apologies from anyone who once hurt her, and no hollow promises of reconciliation. Instead, it read like a ledger of emotion, steady, clear, and quietly devastating. It was Lisa who pitched it, first to a network of advocacy groups, then to a small press specializing in memoirs of structural survival. An editor responded with one sentence. She wrote what most of us never admit, that caretaking is rarely recognized until you stop. The publisher didn't ask her to change the title. Shortly after the announcement, Eleanor received an Invitation from a producer at NPR's Modern Elder, a podcast exploring resilience, autonomy, and what gets called too late until it becomes necessary. The episode was called When You Walk Quietly, But Carry the Deed. They recorded in a soft-lit studio, microphones wrapped in foam, and the host's questions gently angled like therapy disguised as curiosity. "Why now?" the host asked. Eleanor blinked once. "Because for years I thought surviving meant staying. It doesn't. Surviving means leaving well and documenting the exit." She didn't stutter. She didn't blink. And for the first time she said her real name on air. That night, her inbox bloomed. Thousands of emails, dozens from younger women, more from women older than she'd ever imagined reaching. One subject line read, "I left during the credits, because you showed me there was a sequel." Another simply said, "I thought I was the only one who had to pay to disappear." 2 days later, Daniel texted her a photo. His daughters stood outside the newly painted house, one holding the green ceramic lamp. The porch had been repainted pale yellow. New flowers lined the walkway. On the bottom corner of the frame, scrawled in red crayon on the sidewalk chalkboard, were the words, "Welcome home." Eleanor saved the photo to her favorites. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she drove 2 hours north and signed a deed of her own. It was a small lakefront cabin tucked behind sugar maples and flanked by overgrown brush. The exterior was tired brown, but the bones were solid. She paid in cash. The owner gave her a nervous smile when she said she didn't need a tour. "I know what I'm buying," she said. "I'm not afraid of work." Within 3 weeks, she had it repainted in soft greens and beige, the color of peace, if peace could be made tactile. The day the painters left, she unpacked a brand new journal and sat on the porch steps, writing her first line with a pen she'd kept from her earliest paralegal job. "They said I was just mouths, but I was the meal, the cook, the fire, and the plate." She closed the journal gently. No rush to fill the next page, just the quiet certainty of owning the pen. Eleanor finally rewrites her own narrative, and this time, no one else gets to hold the last word. They called her disposable. Now they couldn't throw a stone without hitting her name in print. It was a Wednesday when the numbers came in. Angela forwarded the press release without a subject line. Eleanor opened it mid-breakfast, toast in one hand, teacup still steeping. The title of the email simply read, "Number 2 on Audible Nonfiction, Week 1. Below it, the list. Memoirs by political giants, media titans, best-selling novelists. And then, sliding in between a war reporter and a retired senator, the mouths I fed." Eleanor stared at the screen, expression still, only her fingers tightening slightly on the ceramic mug. A second email followed an hour later. 2 community colleges, one in Oregon, one in Michigan, had added her book to their required reading lists for courses titled Family Systems and Financial Ethics. She didn't forward the news. She didn't post about it. She printed the page and slid it between the first and second pages of her journal, pressed flat like a leaf she didn't want to brag about, only remember. That evening, Angela called with a tone Eleanor now recognized as wary. "Brent's lawyer reached out," she said. "Wants a mediated apology exchange. Said Brent's open to closure." Eleanor let out a low, almost bemused breath. "Tell them closure's available at bookstores or court archives." "No reply it is." Camille moved in by spring. The co-op's guest house wasn't large, just a converted garage with fresh drywall and space for a mini-fridge. But to Camille, it might as well have been Paris. She'd enrolled in culinary school with the help of a scholarship fund she didn't know Eleanor had anonymously seeded under the name Meal Made Real Trust. She found out when the tuition office accidentally included the LLC name on a billing notice. Camille arrived at Eleanor's front door holding the letter, eyes glassy. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "No," Eleanor replied, "but I wanted someone to learn what it feels like to be fed and thanked." That night, after Camille had gone back to her own little space, Eleanor stood on the lake dock barefoot. The air was sharp, but not cruel. She lit a candle from a handmade ceramic dish, soft blue wax, wick trimmed. The label read, "Freedom isn't free." Next to the candle sat a small wooden box. Inside was her old wedding ring, still polished, still gleaming in a way it never did on her finger. She didn't speak when she tossed it into the lake. The splash was small, the echo enormous. The next morning the publisher called. A short film adaptation had been greenlit by an independent studio. They wanted to discuss creative control. "You can have it," Eleanor said, "on one condition." "Which is?" "Nobody plays me prettier than I was. I want her strong, not softened, sharp, not airbrushed, and no crying in bathtubs. I left with receipts, not roses." They agreed. Weeks passed, like chapters, quiet, dense, unskimmable. She began clearing shelf space for the letters still arriving, most in handwriting that looked aged by survival, but it was a package, small, square, wrapped in muted gray paper, that caught her by surprise. Inside, a simple wooden frame. In it, a printed apology letter, signed by Brent. The language was stiff, lawyer-sculpted. It referenced regret, misunderstanding, and what was lost in miscommunication. Beneath it, a check. Angela had warned her it might come. "Part damage control," she said. "Part fear, but mostly he knows you outwrote him." Eleanor didn't hesitate. She slid the check into the fireplace and watched the corners curl. The frame she kept, not for sentiment, but for symmetry. Later she dusted the bookshelf she rarely touched and placed the frame upright, right between inheritance and the body keeps the score. As she stepped back to admire the placement, she ran a cloth across the shelf's top edge. She whispered, almost lazily, "Royalty returned." Eleanor's influence becomes legacy, and she begins drafting her second manuscript, not survival, but restoration. Some locks don't guard doors, they guard what you finally let in. The pendant was no bigger than her thumbnail, gold, matte, shaped like a house key. Eleanor bought it on a rainy afternoon from a small artisan boutique tucked between a hardware store and a laundromat. The display card read, "Key to nowhere, or anywhere you make your own." She wore it under her collarbone, beneath layers of flannel and linen, never displayed but always present. Some jewelry begged for attention. This one reminded her that not all keys opened doors. Some just proved you never needed one. Her co-op apartment, 2 stories now after the neighbor upstairs moved to Oregon and she made a quiet offer, had become more than home. Twice a month the living room transformed. Folded chairs, a coffee table cleared of books, and a chalkboard with a standing rule written in neat cursive, "We leave shame at the door." It started as a support group. Now it was something harder to name, part gathering, part grounding. Women showed up with stories, not excuses. Some were quiet for weeks before speaking, some never stopped. They called it Elle's Evenings, though Eleanor never once called herself the host. She just made sure the lights were soft, the door stayed unlocked until the last woman left, and the coffee never ran out. Each December, Daniel and the girls drove up in a red second-hand Subaru. The back seat always held a basket of drawings, handmade cards, and the occasional gingerbread creation too unstable to stand, but too sweet to discard. The girls called her Aunt Elle. No one corrected them. No one needed to. Last year, the youngest gave her a folded paper note with a stick figure drawing and one sentence written in block letters. "You're the reason the house feels like stories." Eleanor placed it on her fridge with a magnet shaped like a gavel. The plaque went up quietly, like most of her victories. A local artist carved it from salvaged oak, letters etched deep and painted soft gray. She screwed it into the front door herself, using a borrowed drill and gloves she hadn't worn since the cabin's repaint. It read, "No entry without kindness." Some neighbors chuckled, some nodded. One left a potted fern beside it with a card that simply read, "Amen." When her first royalty bonus cleared, Eleanor made a call she'd rehearsed since the day she'd walked away. She didn't donate to her alma mater. She didn't fund a bench in her name. She sent $10,000 to a regional housing equity fund in her mother's name. The fund director called to thank her and asked if she wanted a photo op or name plaque. Eleanor declined. "Put it toward the women who have more fear than furniture. That's enough." The wire transfer completed 2 days before she did something she hadn't done in over 30 years. She returned to her childhood church. The building had been repainted since she last stood beneath its eaves. The steeple looked smaller. The windows no longer had that warped glass that made sunlight look like a secret, but the altar was still there, and so was the row of votive candles, waiting quietly for permission. Eleanor lit one. She didn't tremble. She didn't pray out loud. She just closed her eyes and said her mother's name. On her way out, she passed a group of women near the bulletin board. One whispered without lowering her voice, "That's her. That's the woman who walked and never looked back." Eleanor paused, not to correct, not to smile, not even to acknowledge. She simply touched the pendant under her shirt, nodded once to no one, and stepped outside into air that no longer pressed. The world now sees Eleanor as legend, but she's not finished becoming real. The story didn't close. It learned how to stay open, without letting everyone in. The folding chairs had been set out early, arranged in an imperfect oval around a coffee urn and a plate of lemon bars someone's daughter had baked. Eleanor and Daniel stood at the front of the community room. No podium, no microphones, just a chalkboard behind them with the words, "Leaving without noise," written in steady cursive. Beneath that, smaller, legal and emotional strategies for quiet exits. The workshop wasn't advertised widely. It didn't need to be. Word of mouth traveled faster when spoken softly, passed hand to hand in whispers rather than shouted from rooftops. The women who showed up that evening weren't loud. They didn't wear armor. They came in cardigans and worn coats, holding notebooks like lifelines. Most didn't smile. A few didn't speak at all. But they listened. Daniel opened with practical logistics, how to document shared assets, when to seek restraining language in leases, which banks allowed rapid account splits. Eleanor followed with quieter truths. The need to copy everything twice, the importance of never announcing an exit, the freedom of silence as a form of defense. She didn't posture. She didn't dramatize. She spoke like someone who'd once had to leave a house she paid for without taking her own set of keys. Midway through the session, a woman in her early 60s, gray bob, weathered eyes, hands that looked used to carrying other people's weight, stood up. She said nothing at first, just crossed the space slowly, like it took effort to claim that many feet of floor. When she finally reached Eleanor, she reached out, pulled her into a full-bodied embrace and whispered, "You made it okay to leave." Eleanor didn't cry, but her eyes closed in that way a person does when the wind finally shifts in their favor. Afterward, while the room emptied out and volunteers stacked chairs, Eleanor quietly gathered the leftover handouts, one by one, folded not with haste but with care, the way she used to fold court motions before faxing them in triplicate. Nothing wasted, nothing dismissed. That night, the snow had begun to fall again. A quiet kind of snow, soft and insistent, that made the trees outside her cabin look like someone had dusted them with powdered sugar and apology. She pulled into the gravel drive just after 9, the headlights cutting gentle shapes into the dark. Inside, the warmth welcomed her like it always did, radiator humming low, floorboards creaking in agreement. She set down her tote, microwaved a bowl of lentil soup, and stood by the window as steam curled up from the rim. No emails tonight, no calls to return, no requests waiting in her inbox. Just the soup, the view, and the thick quiet of a life she'd built herself. She powered off her laptop and silenced her phone before picking up a copy of The Mouths I Fed, the paperback edition, spine already soft from handling, corners bent where readers had annotated margins with their own stories. She didn't open it to read, she just held it in both hands for a long moment like someone holding the proof of breath. The answering machine blinked twice. She let it play. Camille's voice filled the cabin with warmth that didn't ask for response. "Hey, Elle, I just wanted you to know, I made the sauce today. I didn't ask anyone how. I just did it. And the kitchen didn't feel scary. It felt like you. I hope you're happy. You deserve it." There was a pause, then a soft click. Eleanor didn't play it again. She didn't need to. Instead, she curled into her reading chair with the bowl of soup resting gently on a tray. The candle beside her flickered low. Pine and clove, the scent she kept for evenings when the world finally felt earned. As she sipped slowly, her breath fogged the window, but she could still see the snow falling. Not heavy, not bitter. Just falling, like it had permission now. She reached for her pen, the one she'd used to draft her very first invoice as a paralegal, and opened a fresh page in the notebook she'd labeled Next. In smooth, deliberate handwriting, she wrote, "They said I was just mouths to feed, but I was the fire, and I never went out." She capped the pen. The snow kept falling, and the light inside the cabin did not flicker. She didn't just survive, she stayed lit.